All right, so my name's Ron. I've been developing with Drupal since 2007, I think. I've been developing websites since '96. I've been freelancing since that time, but for the last few years I was working for a company called EDC. I just stopped working for that company recently, and I'm freelancing again. And at the February meetup next door, Ed and I and Chris Rowe and I think somebody else were getting in a conversation about website hosting options, and I was raving about AWS and Amazon, so Ed asked me to talk about that. My knowledge at Amazon is all back-end stuff, so since this is a front-end meetup, I'm going to try to steer it toward a front-end user interface experience without going into all the SSH stuff and all that jazz. I'm going to post all these links at this website here, this meetup, so you have access to all this information. I'm going to go through it quickly, and then I'll take questions at the end, unless there's something I really didn't explain well. And again, like I said, I'm going to breeze over any of the really heavy technical stuff, because that's not what I'm trying to get into. The idea is that if you've only worked for a company, if you're a front-end developer, even if you're a back-end developer, if you've never set up your own website hosting, it isn't really that hard. It's something that you can learn how to do. There are a lot of solutions out there. I'm going to discuss some that I'm aware of, that I've narrowed down to some that I can put into a talk. That's not to say that these are the only solutions. There are a lot of different solutions out there, but these would seem to work for me. And basically, you want to set up a website, you're going to do these 7 things. There might be 6, there might be 8. Again, roughly, you need to register a domain name. You need someone. And let me back up a minute. So a client comes to you and says, "Hey, can you set up a website for me?" And your answer is yes. And then this is the process you got to go through. You set up a domain name for them, then you set up an email hosting service for them using that domain name. Then you choose a Drupal hosting provider. Again, what's this next one? Set up a domain name A record, so that essentially what I'm saying is that domain name needs to post to wherever, or point to wherever that hosting provider is. You're going to upload your Drupal installation. You're going to run a security check on your Drupal site. And then you're probably going to want to set up an SSL certificate. Now, of all those might even be a little bit technical. The big thing is set up a domain name, get the email, choose your hosting provider, upload your Drupal site. So let's just look at choosing a domain name. A lot of places you could go. I kind of like Namecheap because it's cheap. And you can see here .coms for a year, they're $10.69. We can look at Amazon itself. I think they have their pricing for their domain names at .com and there. That's $12 a year. You could use a site that rhymes with Ho Matty. I'm not going to say what it is. I would stay away from them, but if you like them, use them. I've used them before, and it's not worth the spam. It's not worth the cold calls they're constantly calling you. They do offer some cool services. If you like them, use them, but they offer a lot of stuff that I don't particularly care for. So, okay, great. You've got your domain name. Now what do you do? Now you want to set up an email hosting for your client. So you're going to go someone that provides email hosting. Rackspace provides it. You can see this $2 a month. Who's this other guy? Fastmail. They provide it. Again, a Google search will find you email hosting providers, and you'll have to spend the time choosing which one provides the level of service that you want for the right price range. Obviously, it's a mom and pop. Say you're designing a website for a mom and pop diner down the street. They're going to need like 2 or 3 mailboxes maybe, and they're looking for something simple. So, factor that into your equation when you go and set up your email hosting provider. Here's the big one. Choosing your Drupal hosting provider. But before I get into that, because that's such a rabbit hole, I just want to speed ahead and go into 4, 5, 6, and 7, which would be setting up your domain name server A records. Again, that gets kind of complicated, but there are plenty of resources that describe that step by step on the web. I would just Google it as far as uploading your site from where you develop, front end, back end, or whatever, to get it where you want to go. Get onto GitHub. It's easy to get onto GitHub. If you haven't used it before, it's just the way things work. I overheard you talking earlier about you're concerned about whether your commits are going to crash with someone else's commits, and it's really actually hard to get that to happen. If that does happen, there's actually, it's I would say relatively easy to unwind it all, to fix it. But anyway.
Good to know.
GitHub is a good, you have to have a GitHub account. Again, doing Drupal security checks, plenty of resources on the web that tell you how to make sure your Drupal site is secure. I'm not going to go into that. Lastly, if you want to get an SSL certificate for your site so that people can log into HTTPS instead of HTTP, so when they're logging in from a coffee shop, someone at the coffee shop with a sniffer isn't looking at the passwords going by because your site's in HTTPS because you have a certificate, an SSL certificate for free from CA Cert that you've installed on your site and set up. No one's going to be able to sniff those logins. Again, plenty of information on the web where to find that stuff. So let's dive into choosing a hosting provider. Let me just click on that and see what happens. You'll see I've crossed out setting up your own physical server farm. Like, you could go out and set up a computer on the internet, or on the web, and there's the box. I'm going to put my site there. It's not cost effective. You're going to end up choosing someone who's a Drupal hosting provider. There's tons of them out there. I've listed 3, Pantheon, Acquia, Omega 8CC, specifically because you'll see why. There's this comparison at Quora.com. It's 2 years old, but it's still pretty relevant. It's very long, and it talks about the pros and cons of each of those. Dries weighs in on it. I think Moshe weighs in on it. So you get some really good information about how these Drupal hosting providers compare. Looking at Pantheon, we can see that $25 a month. Regardless of what hosting provider you're going to use, you're going to see this. The basic site is at basic service is at $25 a month, depending on the small site. It ranges up from there. If we go to Acquia, Acquia has this nice, slide bar interface, which you can see their smallest site, smallest storage just for a developer. They're starting at 134. Right? But then they're doing $100,000 websites. They're not doing the mom and pop diner down the street. So that makes sense that they just we'll cut those guys out right away. Now, isn't to say that they wouldn't take someone that small, but they're looking for the big enterprise solution. So, I mean, relatively speaking, once you start getting to that price range, that's a reasonable price. The other one I mentioned, Omega 8CC, again, if we look down here, they're starting out at the $28 a month range. Specifically, what's interesting about Omega 8CC and Acquia, for that matter, is both of those companies host their websites on Amazon AWS. Amazon is the big backbone of a large part of the internet. They offer this service where they do website hosting. Acquia can do it. Omega 8CC does it. You could do it if you wanted to. What originally I do it, as a matter of fact, I host my own sites on AWS, and what got me into it was Omega 8CC. They actually host using I never know how to pronounce this program, but this is how you pronounce it.
Aegir.
No.
Aegir.
Aegir.
Not.
It's
Aegir or Aegir.
Yeah, I always used to say Aegir too. It's Aegir. Anyway, what's Aegir? You want to host many Drupal sites, but you want the hosting platform itself to be Drupal. So you're using Drupal to manage all these different Drupal sites, which is whoa, wait a minute. That's too much Drupal almost. But someone came up with this idea, and what does it look like? Kind of looks like this. This is a demo site at Omega 8CC, and you can see this is a Drupal site itself. You can see here are my fake Drupal sites I've got here. I can install different Drupal installs, so I've got Commerce, Kickstart, Open Public, Open Academy. It's kind of neat. It's also kind of a headache, to be honest with